Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Mel. On this channel, I talk about all things career, lifestyle, wellness, helping you balance your multifaceted lives. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for returning and watching this video. Your support does not go unnoticed. I truly appreciate it. Today, we are going to hop right in. So I'm going to talk about my 10-year career journey post-grad. So how I went from making $10 an hour as a front desk receptionist with a bachelor's degree to making $250,000 as a project manager / entrepreneur, quitting it all, and where I am in my journey now. I'm going to give you encouragement and just tell my very transparent story of the ebbs and flows of my own career journey. But being a career coach as well, I would be remiss if I did not give you practical tips and tools to help you navigate your own career transition journey, increase your income, know what certifications you may need to get if you are in project management. And so we're going to cover all that. So get your tea, get a notebook, pen and paper. Let's get started. Okay, so let's start in 2014, May 2014 to be exact. I am graduating from Auburn University with a biomedical sciences degree that had a pre-med concentration, and I am walking across that stage with no intent to go to medical school at all. I partied a little bit too hard at Auburn, I'm not going to hold you, okay? And junior year at Auburn came around and everyone's taking their MCAT, and I don't even have the 3.7, 3.8. I took a practice MCAT and failed miserably, and I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Life is about to hit me fast. What am I going to do? But I had out-of-state tuition being in Auburn and being, a Georgia resident, and I was like, I can't afford to go back and change my major this late in the game. So I was like, let me go ahead and graduate with this biomedical sciences degree and I'll figure it out later. In parallel, I was already starting my first healthcare job, if you will, working as a front desk receptionist for a dermatology practice in Auburn, and I was making $9.50 or so an hour, $10 an hour maybe. And then when I graduated, they gave me a hefty increase of 30 cents. And so that's how I say I started from, making $10.30 an hour as a front desk receptionist. And so I realized I didn't have the grades to go to medical school. I also hated the sight of blood and did not like bodily fluids at all. Didn't want to be touching nobody or, solving those types of problems. And so I'm like, what am I gonna do? Anyway, I graduate from Auburn, working for this dermatology office, and then my mom has a come to Jesus meeting with me, and she's like, look, if you're not planning on building your career, it's time for you to grow up and come home. And so it was very depressing for me to graduate from this prestigious university with this prestigious degree, and really I felt like at the time I had nothing to show for it, which wasn't true. It just, I was just going on a different journey, but I didn't see it like that at the time. So I was extremely depressed, and I talk about that in my testimony video. Depression ain't the word. I tried to take myself out of here, all the things. And so I come back home. I ended up getting my first role working for a healthcare organization here, doing the same work that I was doing at the dermatology practice. So I was making $12.44 an hour. This is December of 2014. And God really favored me in that role because the way they did the interview process, long story short, there were a bunch of different front desk roles that they were hiring for. So I had to interview with all these different departments, and they pretty much picked and chose the person that they wanted to be their front desk person. All the departments that we interviewed with wanted me. So I went from not knowing what I was going to do to being able to choose which department I wanted to work for, which was a blessing. And God was looking out for me even when I wasn't looking out for myself. He had it all. That's why I said it's not that I didn't have anything to show for it. He was just taking me on a different path that I would eventually see later on. And so I ended up going with a specific department because it was a Black woman that would be my leader. She was already pouring into me. I know you're not just here to be a front desk receptionist. I'm going to help you cultivate your career. Come work for me and I'll walk you along the way, which is why it's so important to have leaders who don't have egos, who's not trying to compete with you, because I would end up working for her in various roles, which I'm going to talk about for the next 5 years. And so having good leaders and mentors is very important. And in whatever stage you are in your career, always pull up other people because you never have any idea who you will be helping. And so fast forward, I get into this role. It's now 2015, and 3 months into that role, I'm working as a front desk receptionist. I'm doing very well. I'm killing it. I'm doing all the things. I'm running circles around people. And I think it's so important early in your career to show up in a level of excellence because you don't have the years of experience to kind of speak for you. You have to show up in a level of excellence so that your work speaks for itself while you're building your career. That's a pro tip. Write that down. Steward where you are well, even if it's not where you want to be. Because I was doing so well in that role as a front desk receptionist that they ended up promoting me within just 3 or 4 months to work as a back office coordinator, where I think I started making about 15, 16 an hour. I had to negotiate with them. I'll talk about salary negotiation today too. but they put me in a back office coordinator role with this patient care coordinator role, working for this specific physician that nobody liked working with. They said that he was racist, that he was difficult to deal with, blah, blah, blah. But I was so eager to get more experience and to make more money because, again, by that point, I think I moved out of my mom's house. I was trying to make it on my own, living in Atlanta. I had a roommate and I was paying for bills with credit cards. So whatever money I could get, I was going to take advantage of it. So I took that role about 4 months into starting with that organization, that promotion rather. And so I'm still trying to figure out how to navigate my career. I'm still trying to figure out what direction I want to take while I'm working this entry-level role. And I ended up starting an MPH program, so a master's in public health program. Even though I realized very quickly that it's not what I wanted to do, I felt like because everybody else was immediately going to grad school that I immediately needed to get into grad school, and I chose a program that I didn't even want to get into. So tip here for my undergrads or for those that are considering going back to school, do not rush it, because I wasted time and money because I would quit that program 5 months in. I talk about the reason why in my testimony video. That's more faith-based, but essentially I was a hot mess. I couldn't keep up with, grad school. I was not in the headspace. Like, I was so messed up mentally at that time. I have a whole nother video on that. So fast forward to 2016, I'm still working in that same patient care coordinator role. My boss had introduced me to project management by that point. So she said, hey, you're kind of already doing project management. You're organizing these plans of care, for patients. You're, organizing specific events and initiatives and schedules with your doctors. You should look into project management because it has, a really promising career path. Her sister did it and did very well. So she was like, you should look into it. And then I was also in a leadership program at my company, which I'm going to plug here. If you are not in a role that you want to be in, make sure that you are at least with a company that has good benefits, because that company would eventually pay for me when I go back to grad school, which I'll talk about. But I was also able to get into a leadership program where I learned about career development, resume writing. I got certified in behavioral interviewing, and I eventually took those tools to start my first business as a career coach. But anyway, make sure that your organization has good benefits and has benefits that will help you develop in your career, especially if you're starting out. Sometimes the organization that you get into is more important than the role, again, when you're first starting out. But anyway, so 2016, I'm starting this leadership program, learning all the things about career development. I'm still working with the same department, but by this point, fortunately, my workload had increased because I was now working the role of two people. So someone left, they didn't refill the role. Instead, they gave that responsibility to me because they knew that I was, wanted to take on more work. But the problem is I was not getting compensated for that extra work. And this is a tip. It's one thing if you are temporarily working two roles, until they fill that position. It's another thing if you are you're early in your career and you just want to take on extra side projects within your department to grow maybe your project management skill set. But it's another thing if you're working two people's roles for an extended amount of time and you're not getting compensated for it. So you have to advocate for yourself, which is what I did. I went to my boss and I said, hey, I want to have a compensation review with HR to make sure that I am being adequately compensated for the work that I'm doing and for the value that I'm providing to the department, especially if this role is not going to be, especially if the second role that I was working is not going to be filled. And so it took a while. It took months. I think it was probably 2017 until they finally bumped me up to I think about $20 an hour. But yeah, advocate for yourself if you are taking on more work for an extended amount of time with no pay increase. So by 2017, I think they were able to bump me up by that point to I think like $18 or $19 an hour. I'd also, taken seriously when my boss told me to look into project management. So I ended up starting an MBA in project management. It was a fast track 1-year MBA program. And again, my organization at the time paid for about 70% through the tuition reimbursement. And so, yeah, I am in grad school. I'm working a very demanding full-time role. Throughout that MBA from 2017 to 2018, I also ended up getting my Lean Six Sigma within that MBA program. And then I also looked into and ended up getting my first project management certification, which was the CAPM. And also I started taking on career coaching clients now that I had gotten done with that leadership program and knew how to write resumes and coach interviews and things like that. So I started my blog called Beauty in a Rough Draft, where I started, helping people navigate the in-between of their faith, life, career journey. And I also started doing resume writing and career coaching on the side. And so, yeah, I was doing all the things. And I think it's so important that sometimes, I know we talk about living our soft life, but sometimes you just got to grind it out, And because I would say from 2017 to 2019 to just grind it out, head down, I was working on my walk with God, but I was also head down in my career. It paid off because eventually I would, double, almost triple my pay after that, which I'll talk about. But at the time, I was making about $19 an hour, doing all these things. Fast forward to 2018. Once I have all of those things under my belt, I go to my boss and I say, hey, hey sis, I have my CAPM, I have my MBA, I finished this leadership program. These are all the things that I have done, within the department, that I've helped the department in so many different ways. And that's why it's an important tip here. Keep a work journal of all the things that you're doing, not just the task, but also the benefit that it is bringing to the department. So if you're decreasing costs, if you're increasing efficiency and productivity, if you're training and developing other staff, all the things that you are doing and the benefit that it is bringing, you want to make sure you have it written down. Don't just go to your boss and say, hey, I want more money, or I want a promotion. I went with receipts. Like, these are all the things that I have done. These are all the certifications and the things that I've done on my own to develop my career. I need a significant increase at this point. And again, given the prior experience that I'd had with having to negotiate salary with them several times, I kind of got the feeling that, it was nothing against my boss, but that specific organization, they just didn't compensate well for their employees. It was just kind of like a known thing. And so I knew that I was probably going to have to leave that organization in order to actually see the increase that I wanted to make. And this is a tip: do not stay loyal to any organization, especially if you are earlier in your career, or especially if you feel like it's time for you to make that jump. Because no matter how good your boss is, no matter how good your team is, no matter how good everyone loves you, if something happens to you, or if you mess up and get fired, they will replace you. Everyone says this: you are replaceable. They will replace you and have someone else in your role, or have someone else taking over your role within the next week. And that is a fact. And so don't be loyal, be respectful, operate in excellence, don't burn bridges, but do not be loyal to an organization, especially if you are trying to, move to the next stage in your career. I say that because I'm making $20 an hour in this role. I know I want to make a significant jump, and I have to make a significant jump because, again, I'm paying for bills with credit cards at the time. Like, I was not financially really stable at the time and trying to, make it on my own. And so it was really a non-negotiable, to be very honest with you. And so I ended up finding a role within the same organization, but working for a different department. And I think that role was paying about $57,000 a year. So it wasn't the jump that I really needed to see to be completely stable, but it was a little bit of a jump. But I knew that I didn't just need to jump at the first increase. I needed to wait and trust God that, that because of the work that I've been putting in, and because of his favor and me going to him about my, my financial needs, that I needed to wait for his actual answer, not just jumping at the first opportunity. So sometimes it's not just about jumping to something because it's more money. Like, is that actually the right decision, the right move that you need to make for your career? And so I waited. I turned down that offer, and I waited and stayed where I was until the right opportunity came about. And it took about, after I got my MBA in 2018, it would take probably about 6 months or so between this and the next opportunity. And so fast forward to now 2019, I ended up getting my first big girl job, I guess, if you will. It was my first project management role. I was working as a project specialist for another healthcare organization here in Atlanta, and that salary was $80,000. So that was like really the big jump for me, where I pretty much almost doubled my pay from where I was working before. And so I started working as a project specialist. This was probably, even to this day, probably one of my favorite roles, because when I say I literally got dunked into project management, like, I was running projects for C-suite level executives, like the president of the entire healthcare system. I was running these projects that impacted the entire organization across 11 hospitals. When COVID happened, I was, helping run different COVID command centers. Like, when you talk about God, I got as much project management experience as you can possibly get in healthcare. And it was a great role. I mean, I was able to go to different doctors' offices and do a little bit of travel within the state, and I was able to meet a lot of about influential people, and I worked for a great team. You know, it was a lot of black women, and you know, it was really an ideal role. I was able to clean up my debts and, you know, get back on track financially. And then when COVID happened, you know, God really favored me. I was still able to work in that role for the time being. I was able to pay off my car. And so things, you know, were finally starting to settle out, and I was, you know, starting to get comfortable. And then our organization started to go through restructuring. And so I remember one week specifically where I was working, you know, on Monday, and then they put this meeting on our calendar with our team that Friday that was with HR and our leadership. And it was kind of like this like looming, not knowing what was going to happen that entire week, whether or not I was going to get laid off. And I was kind of like, God, like you brought me this far, like, you know, surely I wouldn't get laid off, right? And so thankfully that specific time, there was another time where it went another way. I'll talk about that. But this specific time I ended up not getting laid off, but it was enough for me to say, okay, I know I'm comfortable where I am, but obviously, you know, this organization, this specific department is going through a lot of transitions. So what's my next step that I need to take? Again, don't get comfortable. What's the next step that I need to take to make myself marketable in the event that, you know, they do go through further restructuring, and, you know, my position is cut. And so I ended up saying, okay, let me take all of my experience. And I realized I had enough project management experience to go for my PMP. And so December of 2020, I do a whole video of how I got my PMP in 30 days. So fast forward to 2021, I now have my PMP under my belt. I'm a little iffy with my job, even though I love it. I'm getting great experience. I'm seeing, you know, I was making $8,000 more money than I ever seen, and things were going well. But again, with that layoff, it did something to me. Like, you know, again, let me just put out some feelers just to make sure. And I'll be honest, I haven't talked about that up until this point, but I talked about how 2017 I started, you know, my blog, and I started career coaching. Well, I also started kind of like doing freelancing project management for small businesses. So there were these like marketing businesses or people that wanted to launch their brand or business. And I would say, you know, hey, let me be your project manager. I charged them, you know, a very small fee, but I was, you know, helping them build their brands and businesses and stuff like that off to the side, in addition to my full-time job. And so when that layoff scare happened, I was like, was that God telling me that I should go into full-time entrepreneurship, or, you know, should I just continue on the corporate path? And so I kind of, you know, was juggling between both of them beginning of 2021, and eventually an opportunity would come about that I still to this day, I don't even remember applying to, where I was able to work for this global medical equipment company as a service excellence project manager. And that was my first six-figure role. This was March of 2021, where I was making now $125,000 a year. And so I'm like, oh, we made it, you know, like that was my answer. Forget full-time entrepreneurship. You know, I'm in the six figures. I'm a six-figure girl now. So I moved into a high rise, you know, eventually I bought a nice car, and, you know, I was living my best life, complete lifestyle creep. Tip here: if you start making more money, do not start immediately, you know, increasing your expenses, because that was not a good decision. And I will tell you why in a few. But, you know, try to always live within your means, or stick to that same level that you were living at before the increase. You know, of course you have things that you want to invest in, but just be mindful, because again, just because you're at the top don't mean you're gonna stay at the top, and you'll see why in a minute. But anyway, that was my first six-figure role, working as a project manager. And then fast forward to 2022, I got promoted again within that company to a behavioral health global program manager. They had this behavioral health technology that they wanted to deploy out, and so I got to help bring that to the North American market. I was doing a little bit of sales, so I was traveling all over the country selling this behavioral health technology. I was also still doing project management, customer delivery, implementation. I was doing training, you know, training the staff on the product. So it was really like the ideal role, and I was making $150,000 doing it. And so you want to talk about being at the top of the mountain. Like, I was on the mountaintop. Like, to me, it couldn't get any better than that. But unfortunately, fast forward to 2023, 5 months into that dream role, I got laid off. You heard that right. I got laid off 5 months into my dream role, where I was making $150,000. Even though our portfolio was doing well, I think the portfolio grew up to like $4 million in revenue, the overall company was not doing well. And so they decided that they were going to do away with all the new products and focus on the products that they've always had. And with that, my role was gone. I kid you not. And this is a tip: How you know you may be about to go is if your leaders start leaving. If the executive leaders of a company start leaving, it's probably time to go. If you get asked, like, provide me a list of your roles and responsibilities that you do on a day-to-day basis, and like pretty much a value proposition of the value you bring to a role, they're about to cut you. It's time to start looking for another role. But me, I was kind of like, surely, I'm on the mountaintop. I live my best life in my high rise, making $150,000. I'm doing well, traveling. Like, surely I'm not gonna get laid off, but I did. I got cut so fast, it wasn't even funny. And so now I'm kind of like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do now, God? Like, did I hear you wrong? Was I supposed to go into full-time entrepreneurship? And maybe I just missed the mark. And so now, granted, they were very gracious to me when I did get laid off. So I still had like 2 months to finish out my role. And then I also got a severance package. So I wasn't like in a bind, but it was very earth shattering to me, because it's like I had worked up, until that point. I told you where I was at, making $10 an hour, then $12 an hour, and so forth. So to get to that point, only for it to be taken from up under me, that was earth shattering to me. And that did a number on my mental health, and it did a number on my relationship with money and me trusting God with money and provision. And so again, thankfully, I had 2 months to figure it out. And so I was like, okay, I didn't have any full-time roles that came about. And again, I had my freelance clients and the other work that I was doing on the side. And so I ended up getting a contractor role where essentially I'm working for myself, but I'm contracted through the staffing agency to work for another hospital here in Atlanta as a IT project manager for them. So that was my first healthcare IT role, technically, even though I was still doing IT projects in previous roles. But anyway, so I start working. At this point, I'm pretty much a full-time entrepreneur, if you will, because I'm not a full-time employee anywhere. I'm a contractor, and then I'm also having my freelance clients. And luckily, that first contract was making about the same as that global manager role, but it was hourly. So I think I was making about $75 an hour. So I'm pretty much functioning as, a full-time entrepreneur, and I love it. I have my hourly rate. I'm getting benefits through the staffing agency that I'm working with. And so, I'm pretty much doing well. And after that contract ended, I found another one. And so by the end of 2023, I was working a contract role, I think making about $65 an hour. That was the second contract. And then I still had my freelance clients on the side. And so fast forward to the beginning of this year, 2024, God gave me 3 very specific instructions. He said, I want you to focus on your walk with me and like getting deeper in me, getting in my word, praying more, just being more intentional on my walk with God. 2, to take better care of my health. Even though I was living my best life, I was the heaviest I had ever been because I had a lot of other personal things that were going on outside of my career. And so, I had gained a lot of weight. I was the heaviest I'd ever been. I ended up losing 25 pounds this year. Side note, I'll do another video on that journey. But God was like, I need you to focus on me. I need you to focus on your health. And I need you to focus on content and creating content and educating people, on your journey and all the skill sets that you have. But because I'd had that traumatic experience of getting laid off in 2023, I didn't really trust God for provision. Like, yeah, I had a full-time contract. I was still making 6 figures. Like, yeah, I had my freelance clients, but I was just scared that like it was going to go away. I had a scarcity mindset for sure. And so I was like, I'm going to, do half of what you told me to do. So I'll focus on you. I'll, work out and get my health right. But, as far as focus on content, I'll get to it when I get to it. But I need to make sure I'm secure financially. And so I ended up getting a second full-time contract in addition to the first full-time contract that I had. So I'm now making about $250,000 a year, if not more, honestly, not including my freelance client work. That's just from the 2 full-time contracts. And so I'm seeing, more money than I've ever seen. But I had no peace about it because I was not obedient to what God told me to do. And God, in his kindness, will sometimes allow unrest and will allow you to be unsettled so that he can get you to where he originally wanted you to be or where he wants you to be next. And so, I would wake up in the middle of the night. I couldn't sleep more than 3 hours. I would wake up in the middle of the night having panic attacks and in sweats. Like, the second full-time contract I had taken on was a very toxic work environment. Like, I hated it, but I was trying to prove a point. I was trying to make sure I had money to take care of myself, instead of trusting God to be my provider and realizing I already had enough. And so fast forward to a few months ago, I finally came to my wit's end. I ended up being in urgent care for a panic attack, and they had to give me medication. Like I had to take an EKG. Like that's how bad it got. It was having physical manifestations. And so I was like, you know what, I cannot do this anymore. And so after I was like, you know what, God, I'm just gonna do what you tell me to do. I ended up letting the second contract that was super toxic, I ended up letting that go. And, you know, just saying, okay, I'm gonna do with what you've given me, which was more than enough. Again, it was just my mindset of like feeling like it wasn't enough. And I'm gonna focus on the things that you told me to focus on. And it all ended up working out because the other full-time contract that I kept ended up converting me to a full-time employee. I'm still fully remote. I'm still making six figures, you know, making good money. And now I have the flexibility to, you know, spend more time with God, to still focus on my health and to create content. And that's why I'm committing to just showing up consistently, because, you know, now I have the space to do so because I'm not working two full-time jobs and all the things trying to take care of myself. I am trusting that when God said everything that you need is on the other side of my obedience, that's what he means. And so that's where I am now in my career. And it has been a journey, but, you know, God has blessed me, and I hope that this video encourages you to trust the ebbs and the flows. That just because you're on the mountaintop doesn't mean you're going to stay there, because sometimes there's a different direction you need to go in. And if you are, you know, not making enough, like, it is just a season. I promise you, it's just a season. You will look back on it and be like, wow, look at all that God has done when you steward where you are well, and when you're obedient and sensitive to where he wants you to go. But again, I've also given practical tips like knowing your worth, negotiating salary when you need to, you know, once you get those certifications, once you do those things to get more experience under your belt, do not get comfortable. Move on to the next thing, you know, and be very honest with your bosses and your mentors about where you want to go so that you don't get stagnant. And so, yeah, I hope that this video was helpful. Let me know what other questions you have if you want me to do a part 2. But I really hope that you gained something from this video. And yeah, I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye, y'all.